Hello and welcome to Hot Issues. This week we're talking education. We're going to find out what impact the various reforms over the years have made. We'll probably be delving into questions of financing university education. Are the funds adequate? Where can we get a lot more funds to put into university education? What is happening at the primary school level? And many more issues. We're going to look into education very, very, very seriously. And we are especially privileged to have somebody who has been deeply involved in education at various levels and is now at the helm of affairs to talk about all of these issues. Coming to you from the lawns of the La Palm Royal Beach Hotel. Welcome to Hot Issues. We are particularly privileged today to have with us the Minister of Education, who is not just a Minister of Education, she has a wide-ranging experience in education. As you do probably know, she was Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, she served on various committees on UNESCO and so on and so forth. Welcome to the studio, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, Prof, what's your assessment of education in Ghana today?
This is a very broad question,
it is.
And I think it's all right. When we talk about education, we're talking about many things. We are talking about levels of education. By levels, we are referring first to the education in the home. That's very important. Sometimes we forget that one. And then there's a formal side of education, or what we have come to describe as formal, meaning the Western-style classroom type of education. And in this area, we're talking about preschool, or kindergarten education. We talk about primary school education, secondary school education, university education, Polytechnic. We talk about vocational education, technical education. So we have different types of education. We also have non-formal education, just as we have the formal education. So to put all of these together and make one comment sometimes is a bit difficult, but I'll try. And I will say that we have a good system. It is the same system that has produced very, very good personnel in many areas, whether from the sciences, from the humanities, broadly conceived in both ways, as they translate into doctors, as they translate into educators or lawyers or business people, social scientists, name all the professions, agriculturalists. They've all been produced by the system, so the system itself is not bad. However, we have a system that should get better. We have a system that should reach more people. We have a system that should be more equitable, more sensitive to different needs. And all we're saying is that we have a system that we can fine-tune to get even better results. Yes, I've named people who have been trained in all these areas. Sometimes when you do a study, as Professor Diamond studied some time ago, it showed that a lot of these products are coming from very few schools. So the challenge I have is, or that I've set myself, is how can we make the other schools a little better than they are now? How can we ensure that regardless where a learner may find him or herself, that person also has a fair chance to become the good doctor, the good teacher, the good professional that we all want? So yes, to sum up, we have a system that can get better.
Is it true that the standards are falling?
This is a very, very big question. Those of us in education normally want facts. Not too long ago, we had a system that was highly selective. Very few people wrote the common entrance examination. Even fewer got admission to the secondary schools. Less numbers again got admission to the sixth form and on to the university. So we're looking at a very, very small number of people. Now we have a very large number of people. We have added the junior high school to the basic school. So it's like everybody goes. So we have larger numbers. We also have many more people to measure the standards by. So when we're talking of falling standards, I really urge that we put them in context. And then also, falling by what? By what measurement? What instrument did we use? Did we look at the results? Are we saying that less people are passing than they used to? Are we saying that the quality, again, is difficult to measure, but we need to find some very clear, guidelines for that. So I will not say they are falling. what I will say is that we need to work harder to ensure that the standards we set ourselves, for example, if a child has attended school for 4 years, they ought to be able to write a few sentences, grammatically correct sentences. Are they doing that? If they leave the junior high schools, are they able to operate? Are they able to write? Are they able to read? How many are able to do that? How many are not able to do that? And more important for us at the ministry, what accounts for that? Where are the hurdles? How do we remove them? Okay.
Honorable Minister, have you seen the Global Competitiveness Report of 2013?
Yes, I have.
It talks about falling standards.
Yes.
It mentions specifically the inability of products of the secondary school to write, grammatically correct sentences and so on.
Yeah, I have seen that, and it's a global thing. So you put it in a very broad global context, and it's a global arena and all of that. But we also know that the rules may not be fair to everybody. If a child is learning in a country where the language that is spoken at home is the same language that is spoken in the community, is the same language that is in which the child is taught, the results should be different. Now, to compare that with a child who is speaking one language at home, hearing another one in school, and then saying that you're using the same benchmark to measure them, I'm not sure if it's very, very fair. Because one child has to work extra, maybe it's coming from a multilingual context like ours, now goes to the classroom, is taught in English. Nobody else at home speaks the language. Sometimes even some of the people teaching may have some challenges in expression in that particular language. So if this child does a little better, I think we should encourage the child and not put this child in a context where he's competing in a very, very uneven context.
But locally, we've been told, for example, that there are large areas, sometimes districts, where the children at basic level cannot pass their examinations.
Yes, that is true, and that is worrying. So again, as I said, you need to find out what is happening. Does the school have teachers? Do the teachers go to school? Does the school have books? Are the books adequate? Is the headmaster working? Does the headmaster understand the headmistress understand the role as a leader of the academic experience? And how is that deployed? Is it the head who stays in the office? Is it the head who ensures that the teachers have their lesson notes properly done, homework properly given, graded, feedback given? All of these will impact on the learning process. Is this happening or not? How about the ministry itself? How about this big agency called the Ghana Education Service? Is that school being supervised? When was the last time a report was done on that school? Where is the report? What did it say? What should we know? What intervention strategies? So it isn't just that school has failed. There are so many things that have not been working, and we need to ensure that each one of them is working. Because I feel to believe that it is possible to have one class or even one school or one cohort where not one student was able to get, let's say, the bare passes in any of the subjects. Is very, very strange. In fact, it even goes against the whole system of evaluation where you may have a curve and then the A's and B's and so on. And you mean everybody got an F there. Somebody has to be held to account to that. And how about the children themselves? Were they coming to school? How about the parents? Were they also ensuring that the children were coming to school? In other words, all these people that we now call stakeholders, have they all played their role? And if they are not playing their role, what should we know? What should we do to ensure that come next year, we don't have the same situation? And I'm glad that we are eliminating them. I think this year we haven't had a single school that scored 0. So we are making a little progress.
But are people being held accountable for the lapses in the educational system?
The rules are all there. One of the things I found very surprising was, to get to some of these documentation. Do they exist? If they don't exist, we need to create them. If they exist, when was the last date? What was the last date on this document? Are we saying that nothing has changed since 95 or 2000? Clearly, so many things have changed. So yes, people have to be held account into account. And I know some countries have a system where the teachers are rewarded according to the number of students who pass. I find that a bit dangerous, in the sense that education is not just about passing. It's about many qualitative things that may not be so easy to measure. So we need to find ways of making people accountable, but not at the expense of the learning process and at the expense of the wider context in which we need to place education.
There have been so many reforms in the educational sector based on all kinds of reports, the Jobo report, the Anamwa report, and so on. Have any of these reforms addressed the basic problems of education as you have enumerated?
Ghana to date has about 13 reforms. Too many, I think, for a country that started formal education not too long ago. Too many. But then you can also understand. The society gets a bit impatient. Yes, we've trained people, but they don't fit into the workplace. They're at home, we don't know what to do with them. They themselves don't know what to do with themselves. So it's disturbing. And then a study is commissioned. And if you study all these reports, from the Gaggisberg ones right down to the latest Anamomesa, there's a thread that runs through. And it's about making our education practical. But you know, thinking is important. Thought is important. Skills are important. So it's a question of bridging these two. Before you do something, you need to think about it. You need to it has to begin as an idea, and then you translate it into practice. And even if you are in a practical situation, you need to understand why things should be done the way they should be done. So the two will have to go hand in hand. So yes, our educational system has traveled some journey up till now. We are not saying that the reforms were bad or the reforms were inadequate. Each one was occasioned in a certain time and place. But one of the things we don't seem to have a lot of patience with is to do proper evaluation. You introduce reforms. Who does any evaluation? Where are they? A case in point is the junior high school system. We had it as an experimental system for over 11 years. And I've been looking for the report. So, you know, it existed somewhere and maybe somebody did the report, just that I don't have it.
Which of the report? The original report by Professor Jobo, or an evaluation of the implementation of the Jobo report? An
evaluation of the implementation of the Jobo report. Because we had the experimental system in a long time before it was run, it became a national strategy. So one of the things I think we should do is to be very patient and know that education takes time. We need to run a system for a while. We need to evaluate it, and then we need to see our way forward. And it's not just in isolation. It should also be in connection with our economy. Okay, you are training people for a purpose. Where do we want to go with our economy as a country? What kind of workforce do we think we are going to need in 5 years' time? Who will be graduating in 5 years' time? What syllabus should the person be learning? Knowing also that we are dealing with a very dynamic society, in a very dynamic sector. Things can change anytime. Okay, so it is all about ensuring that the products are imaginative, they are innovative, they can recognize opportunity, they are willing to learn, they are willing to adapt, they are willing to turn even challenges into opportunities and be able to see their way out, because the world is not static, it's not fixed. Anything can happen, and people need to amend. You know, you need to have a kind of malleable sensibility to be able to cope with a fast-changing world such as ours.
How true is the assumption that some people find thinking a lot more easier than doing things with their hands and so on?
My feel will be
vice
that,
versa.
You know, different people have different talents or different proclivities towards the things that they do. It is part of the business of education to isolate that. But having isolated that, I would not like to see the distinction between, let's say, the thinkers and the doers made too early. Sometimes we do it too early. it shouldn't happen, because the thinker needs to do and the doer needs to think. So yes, somebody may have a talent with creating something, but it has to begin as an idea, and I think I've said that in the course of our discussion. So we need to find people's talents and help them to realize those talents, and this is where I'll use this medium to appeal to parents. I'm a doctor, so I want my son to be a doctor, or I'm a lawyer, I want my daughter to be a lawyer. All of that is fine, but then is this person best suited for this? Sometimes yes, other times no, and it can create a whole lot of problems. The children feel their parents have lost faith in them, and that's a huge minus. So let us be in a position where we can support our children through what they have demonstrated and not what we think they should do.
Some of the things that have been brought up by the reform has had to do with the length of education. Has it been beneficial?
Yes, if you begin with especially the Jobo report, the Kwapon report, all of them, those early ones focus on the length. That we were going to school for too long. You go to primary school to class 6, then from 1 to form 4 those days, and that's already 10 years, 11 years. And then you go to secondary school 5 years, and then 2 years, and sometimes it never ends. And some will end up in the teacher training colleges those days, do set B, do set A, then go to the university to do diploma, or it's like it just wasn't ending, and it wasn't right. So finding the way to make it not only shorter but also efficient. As we talk about the duration, we should also be interested in the products that are coming out. Who are these people? How well are they prepared? How well are they themselves prepared to help themselves? Okay, so for me, those issues should also be just as important. And also to notice that in a learning environment, you have different people. Some require a little time, others get it quickly, and so on. And that is why we train teachers. As a trained teacher, you are able to pick up the different categories in which you can put your students and then bring all of them along. It is possible. They are all things we teach.
The Anamwa report appeared to have suggested that the length of time was not really that crucial, and that what was crucial was the quantity of resources being injected into education, the system of instruction, the quality of instruction, and so on. Do you agree with the Anamwa report?
Definitely, because different people may need different lengths of time to get the same thing. Okay, and it's about efficient use of resources. It's not so much the amount, but the use to which you put that resource. I've been to schools where there are boxes of chemicals that have stood there, nobody has even opened them. Okay, and so many things. So it is about good utilization of time. Okay, if for example the recent study that came out done by the Institute of Educational Planning and Administration is saying that on the average, and these are averages, so there'll be differences. On the average, some teachers spend 35% of the time on task instead of 100%. Then really you can stretch the time all you want and it may not happen. So you need to ensure, why is that happening? First of all, why do they spend such little time on task? How can we increase the time on task? Okay, because when we're talking about quality education, so many things go in. And this is why the Anamwa Mensah report is emphasizing the quality of the outcome. Yes, the structures and so on, but by themselves they don't make quality. It's also the quality of the teacher, him or herself. Beginning with the entry characteristics of the teacher, the program of training at the College of Education, the methods by which this teacher can improve him or herself at work, the support that the teacher gets. All of these are important inputs that will achieve us the quality education. So I think that under Mensah, the group, they have a strong point.
Fee-free education, and at what levels? Is that possible, and at what levels?
Currently, there are no fees to be paid at the basic levels. But let me take you back a bit. We also have in our constitution a provision for private provision of education. And at that level, the government doesn't have much control over how much schools should charge. So there are two things, the public sectors and the private sector. If a government decides that the human resource development is so important and that it should make provision for it, so will it be. Now, in any country today, we've all come to understand why education is so important and why money should not be a reason why somebody is not accessing any education at all. If that is the case, then government must ensure that all children of school-going age have the chance to go to school. Our statistics recently show that Ghana has done very well in terms of access, especially if you look at the basic level from primary school up. We are not doing badly at all. And in order to maintain this number, you need to ensure that whatever the stumbling blocks are, you are removing them. And one big stumbling block tends to be the fees. Sometimes it is not just the fees, it is also ancillary costs. For some parents, then parents also have roles to play, definitely. As I said, education begins from the home. The parent has a very important role to play, if only about loving your child, appreciating your child, ensuring your child goes to school on time, ensuring that the child is not doing work above the child's energy levels, and so on. All these are very important. However, for some parents and for some children, even a pen can be a reason why they are not going to school. It can be a uniform. Children want to look the same. All my friends wear shoes, I don't, so I will not go. We've all been children. So then you need to find out, and it's a very delicate balance. You need to play this balance and at the same time ensure that parents who are able to support their children are not taking undue advantage of the system. But any country can decide that insofar as basic education is concerned, and insofar as we think that everybody must access this, we will remove all barriers for everyone, regardless. Okay, now you know that we have capitation grant came in, school feeding came in, exercise books, textbooks, uniforms, and so on. All of these social intervention programs have yielded good results. And we need to, evaluate them too. Do we need to continue with all of them? Do you need to change some of them? Do you need to introduce new ones and so on? You mentioned shoes. And I was also going to add children who are challenged. Okay, and for which reason? Maybe the parents are not sure how the public will receive them, how they'll be treated in the schools. And sometimes children are very merciless when it comes to teasing, because they are not very mature. They don't understand that their colleague has a problem. So you have the special schools, and that is why the government picks the bills for all the children in those schools. Okay, so yes, it is possible to ensure that as much as possible. Our constitution says FQ. So the free is in our constitution for basic, okay, free compulsory basic education, to the extent that we are even identifying those who have fallen out of the system. Maybe for purposes of where they live, for purposes of the work their parents do, they are not able to come to school. The introduction of the complementary basic education has been very important. I was privileged to visit one class somewhere in the Bono region, and it was really fascinating. So we need to track the integration into the system to support them, to ensure that they stay. Okay, now as you move up, it becomes a bit more interesting because the cost factor rises. But you also notice that the number goes down. Okay, I'm looking at a situation where it ought to be possible in the not too long future to be able to run the senior high school system almost like the junior high school system, in which case cost is low and access is high. Because we call ourselves now a middle income country. It imposes certain obligations on us. You cannot have the same workforce and the same system as you did when you were, what were we called then, underdeveloped or developing, something like that, So you need to pay attention to all of these. If you have the means, it's almost like a home. You need to decide, where should my salary go? If your children's education is so important, the bulk of your expenditure will go there. If you feel other things are also more important, so that will be. So yes, I can see us stretching into the secondary school. And in the constitution it says progressively. So it has to be progressive. Okay?
And a 10-year period. We've passed that 10-year mark.
You mean 10 years?
Yeah, the 10 years from the promulgation of the constitution.
Yeah.
Progressively, but ending 10 years after the promulgation of the
because
constitution.
other things change. Maybe in 10 years, I'm not sure if we're foreseeing our status as middle income. As I said, things change, and education has to be dynamic in its response. Okay, so that now, for example, we know that for a long time, secondary schools don't pay fees. I was asked some time ago to visit what Kenya had done and Uganda had done is so dramatic. And I said, we've done it already. When I was in secondary school, when I was in sixth form, we didn't pay fees. So Ghana has jumped these hurdles a long time ago. Okay, it's an ancillary cost. You put your child in a boarding school, the child must be fed, must be clothed, utilities, and so on and so forth. These are all costs. Okay, but in terms of student fees being used to pay teachers, in terms of student fees used to pay electricity and water, and in terms of tuition fees at secondary schools, they don't exist. So we are already there.
But the boarding school system also has its huge benefits.
By all means.
Don't they outweigh the considerations of cost and so
No,
on?
it's not either or. All I'm saying is that in the boarding school system, you have extra costs. And Ghana, we love the boarding school system to the extent that there are a number of day schools, and the parents themselves, PTAs and so on, assemblies have combined to build hostels, okay, to make the children feel that they're going to boarding school. These all have cost implications. Okay, they're also very good day schools. Okay, so yes, if I don't have money to put my child in a boarding school, it doesn't mean that my child should not go to secondary school at all. That's very, very serious. And it's not so much because you went to boarding school that will necessarily do it for you, if I may use the expression. It is a quality of instruction, it is a quality of the experience that come together to form the quality we are looking at.
Yeah, but the boarding school helps the process of acculturation.
Oh yes.
Because we come from different ethnic backgrounds and so on.
Oh yes. It has huge benefits. So one of the things we need to do is to find out, okay, if this is the benefit of the boarding school, and we cannot have boarding schools everywhere, what are the day students losing? How can we ensure that they have as much of the experience of the boarding schools as possible? And there are many ways. Games, sports is one of them. Even sharing meals in a dining room, is also important. You can find other ways in which you bring them together to appreciate ordinary human failings, ordinary human strengths, not necessarily because of where the person comes from. In our own time, you go to school with your friend and you go home with your friend, and at that age it never occurs to you to find out where your friend comes from. And that's a big strength, because you just like the person because of who the person is and not where the person comes from. And this is where lessons must also be learned by us, the parents. We are the ones who put all these thoughts into our children's heads, and some of them are not necessarily very, very beneficial.
Government is currently thinking about upgrading polytechnics to university status. There are several people in education, prominent people in education, like Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah and so on, who think that's a very bad idea.
Oh.
What do you think?
Well, actually, I haven't had a chat with Prof, so I'm not sure about exactly what he means by it becoming a bad idea. Now, you see, we need to look at many things. We need to look at prestige. It's very prestigious to go to the university. Why should somebody who is building a house for you feel less confident because the person didn't have this? Confidence, identity is very important. Sometimes we don't think it's important, but it is central. So that is one. Now the second thing also is that a lot of the students who go to the polytechnics end up going to the universities. So the universities themselves have created a slot for them. They come in for 2 years instead of the usual 4 years, because they've done 3 years at the Polytechnic. Now you mentioned length of learning. So you need to find out, so what is it that could have been done at the Polytechnics for this student to have finished school early enough, to have had the confidence and to have gone out to do their work. So that's also another issue or another area that we need to consider. But the one thing is that the Polytechnic universities will not duplicate the existing universities. They have different functions. Recently, if you look at the demography of the Polytechnics, you notice that there are many students in the humanities going there. And we've taken a very serious view of it at the ministry, and we are putting intervention strategies there, not getting rid of the students, but ensuring that we are increasing the number of students with the science and math that the polytechnics need. So if it is about upgrading the quality of instruction so they don't need to end up at the university, if it is about instilling enhancing identity, if it's about putting confidence in people, and if it's about not duplicating what we have, and if it's about even teaching differently, so the other areas we need to be interested in as we upgrade to polytechnic universities. What is going to change? Is it just the signboard? Hopefully not. Is it the syllabus? Yes. Is it the methodology? Yes. Is it the output? Is a polytechnic university student going to sit in an exam room and write a 3-hour paper and say they have a degree? Or is he going to combine the theory with practice and produce something? When we talk about hubs, when we talk about laboratories of ideas, when we talk about innovation parks and so on, how about these? So I think we stand a chance to turn it around and to do even more and better of the things that they're doing now. So we've gone around. In fact, we've looked at the German model that looks good, and we are in partnership with them, and they will come, hopefully we'll settle for them to come inspect the polytechnics. And our idea, it will not be the same way in which all the 38 colleges of education were all upgraded at once. We've learned our lesson. It won't happen that way. We'll set our benchmarks. We'll look at human resource, that's critical. We look at equipment. We look at past performance, and all of this will determine as we gradually upgrade the polytechnics. It will not be wholesale. That is out of the question.
But originally, what were the polytechnics meant to achieve which the universities were not achieving? What is the difference? What was the difference meant to be?
You see, our universities have a difference, have a history. The University of Ghana was modeled after the University of London. I'm not sure how many polytechnic programs they had then. Okay, so it has a different character. That was why we had Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Already the focus was shifting. Then the University of Cape Coast was set up as a university for science education. So you can see that even as early as the early 60s, the focus was shifting from the humanities onto the sciences. Then came the idea that if we need to progress as a country, we need technicians, we need scientists, and therefore the polytechnics also came in with that focus on it. So that is part of the difference. But the polytechnic education brought you to lower middle level. Now we want to take them to a higher level, because that is what we need in this country. We have our oil and gas industry. How many of the technical people are we producing? At what level do we need to produce them? We cannot keep producing the lower level people and think that we are going to answer the questions and the dreams and the aspirations of the 21st century. It will not happen. So things will have to change.
It's been suggested that if you look at all the universities, they're beginning to look the same. I mean, the University of Science and Technology has a faculty for law, it has a faculty for sociology, and so on. What is happening?
Yeah, you haven't mentioned my own university that we also have shifted, or, I think that we need to pay attention to the acts that establish them. Okay, and in each of these acts, there's a window for responding to social needs. Let me use medicine. We have the University of Ghana only producing doctors. And as I speak this year, they were able to admit 200. If we didn't have tech come along, if we didn't have UDS come along, if we didn't have UCC come along, we'd still be producing 200 doctors a year. Imagine, and the population is not static. Just imagine for a minute. So it's not so much that they've lost their character. We can strike that argument, but I think we also need to look at the fact that they are responding to social needs. Okay, and it's not just doctors, as you said, law, and other areas also. But having said all of that, you also notice that they still have their character. As you see, for example, the largest faculty remains education. We have a huge distance education program, so we are still focusing on that. In the sciences, we noticed we have a problem. We did a study looking at the results, working away 20 years and coming back, and noticing that the subject that was stopping most students from moving up, math, science. We set up a big committee. We had a lot of help. The report is ready. We are even implementing. Only this year, we have trained over 500 mathematics teachers, retrained. Okay, because we needed to ask ourselves, was it the syllabus itself? Was it the teaching? Was it the evaluation? What was it? What makes students easily pass one subject and not another? Maybe it's math not for everyone. These are big questions, but we need to ask ourselves those questions. We all agree, yes, it's important, everybody must have math. But everybody is not passing. So then what is it? How can we make many more people pass? So that we can have the requisite number of math and science students applying to go into the Polytechnics and applying to go into KNUST. Okay, I'm sure KNUST would be very happy to have many more qualified math and science students apply than is currently the case.
It has been suggested that the numbers of people we are training abroad could be cut down substantially, and that if we did that, local education would benefit tremendously. It's suggested, for example, that in the UK, the amount of money we spend per student in the UK could train 10 students in Ghana.
I couldn't agree with you better. We need to strengthen postgraduate education in this country. We need to put more resources into postgraduate education. And our professors are capable. You see, that's what makes it frustrating. They are capable of training most of these people. If individuals want to train their children outside, nobody will stop them. But if it must come from government funding, and we're already doing that with Get Fund, we're already doing that with other funders, including the GNPC Foundation, on which I'm privileged to serve. Finding where are these kids going? What are they going to learn? Why can't they learn those subjects here? And if institution A needs a lab, it's better we put the money into constructing that lab or equipping that lab so we can train more people than sending the resources elsewhere so that the labs elsewhere are always better equipped. So I agree with you. And it's not just the money, it's also the experience. It's many things. It's good to experience things, but then the price tends to be rather steep.
Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are talking about education. And we are privileged, maybe lucky, to have with us the Honorable Minister of Education, Professor Jane Naana Opuku-Agyemang. Why can't we train our doctors from the polyclinics?
This is a good question, and I'm sure the number of doctors we produce is still worrying. And what is even more disturbing is that we have a number of students who wish to be doctors, who have studied hard and who qualify to be trained as doctors. But the spaces are so scarce that we just are not able to take even a fraction of those who qualify. The question has come up, and we've asked ourselves, how can we train more doctors? It's a conversation we've had even at the Council of the College of Physicians and Surgeons that I've been privileged to be serving on for the past 3 years or so. how do other countries do it? What are the best practices elsewhere? What can we learn? And believe me, this is something that bothers the college too, because we all know that the numbers are just too few, and at this rate we are not going to reach as many people as we should. So one of the ideas that came was that let's visit some countries. And I had this conversation with His Excellency the President, who is very much in favor and is supporting it. A few of us, let's go and see what do the facilities look like, and do they produce bad doctors as a result? What are their own challenges, and so on. So it is something that is very, very worrisome. Every child who is studying science wants to be a doctor, and a whole lot of them qualify, as I said. So we need to find ways of, can we take 2 batches a year? What can we do? What really can we do? So we need to think through with the deans of the medical schools. We need to think through with the College of Physicians and Surgeons. We need to think with the council, Ghana Dental and Medical Council. We need all of us to sit down and think through this, so that we can propose strategies that work.
But we are importing about 200 doctors from Cuba every year, and they are trained from the polyclinic.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's go and see, what do the polyclinics look like? What facilities do they have? What can we learn from them? Maybe that exposure will help us.
Now, is it true that we are going to sack pupil teachers?
It is not true. The policy is this: every pupil teacher has a 1-year contract and is renewable upon certain conditions. If there are no trained teachers available, we will fall on pupil teachers. If there are trained teachers, we will replace the pupil teachers. However, other measures have been put in place to ensure that the pupil teachers are able to upgrade themselves. One of them is distance learning. Another one is the untrained teachers diploma in education. So these are opportunities that have come. In a couple of years back, they had to get study leave the classroom, go and teach, and it came with all kinds of problems beyond the cost. This method is a little bit more flexible, but the one thing we need to watch is to ensure that some don't take undue advantage, abandon their children in the classroom because they are learning, or go to a class, not set any assignment, do nothing, and take your own book and read. That we will not be happy with. But to say that we are sacking all pupil teachers, I found it very strange, because I wasn't aware of any such decision taken anywhere.
Earlier in the week, you were talking about ghost names in the educational system at Kumasi. What is the extent of this problem?
I think it's a very big problem with our public services generally, but we are interested in our sector. It's a very big problem of maybe people who have disengaged from the system, who are still on the payroll, people who have resigned, who are still on the payroll, people who may never even have been employed, who are on the payroll. So that is why we have made human resource management a big part of our strategy for this year, beginning this January, because we saw the situation last year and we were not very happy, and we decided, what do we do about this? Okay, cleaning up the payroll, ensuring that the people at post are the ones we have employed. Okay, finding out how, even going back, how do people get employed into the system? Why do I hear of somebody who has taught for a year and has no salary? Who employed that person? What was the mechanism? How many people are in that category? How many people are are on our payroll who should not even be there? For what reason? Okay, so we need a lot of support in getting this unpleasant job done, but it has to be done.
It's been suggested that if we apply modern science, we could get programs, computer programs and so on, to eliminate the ghost names.
Let me tell you something about computers. Garbage in, garbage out. It's human beings who put that information in. We need to be vigilant at all levels. I'm not saying they are bad. I'm not saying they cannot help us. But what I'm saying is that
The human element is also
very important. And you need to bring people to account when they run the whole nation down like that.
Were you surprised about the revelations that came from the National Service Secretariat?
Of course I was surprised. I was surprised because I didn't expect that such things were going on, you know. But beyond the surprise also, you know, so I always look at the act that sets establishments up. And you'll notice that at the Ministry of Education we have 20 agencies under us. That's not the number. It's okay. But for some of the agencies, you know, the acts are set up in such a way that the Ministry of Education itself has very little to do with them. Maybe the dream was to make them autonomous, little interference and so on. But sometimes it doesn't turn out so well. The act of the National Service, for example, does not even have a representation from the ministry on it. Then if you are on it or your rep is on it, you'll be asking for quarterly reports. Are there internal audit reports? What do they look like? How about the external auditors report? What are they saying? So that you are not taken by surprise. Okay, so these are some of the things that we are looking at. Again, we noticed this last year. So we have set up a legislative committee. And we are looking at all the conflicting acts. Sometimes one act is established, another one comes in, the old one is not repealed, there are contradictions and so on and so forth. So we are cleaning all of these things up. And we are arguing that insofar as that agency operates under the Ministry of Education, we must have representation on their board. We must have a sense of what is going on. And it should be our right to demand those quarterly reports. And it's not about policing, it's rather about collaborating. It's about supporting them. This is what the internal auditor is saying. What mechanism are you putting in place? For example, are we saying that nobody ever saw this? When, you know, what was the slightest hint of this and what was done about it? Clearly there's something that seems quite entrenched. And everybody says, oh, it's a very old thing. It's a very old thing. How old? When did it come into being? And how was it nurtured and kept and so on? So many questions need to be asked.
Well, now Dr. Pesa White has been appointed as acting director of the service. What are we to expect next? Why is the board still in place? Why has the board not been removed?
No.
What are we expecting next?
You see, timing has been of the essence here. We've just deployed tens of thousands of youth into the field. The machinery must run, even as the investigations continue. On what basis are we going to dismiss the board? Let the investigations finish. Maybe many more people or less people, we don't know. Let's allow the system to run. Let's allow the investigations to conclude. Recommendations will come, and whatever they are, that is what we'll work with. So we are not going to preempt or be seen to be interfering with the system, but national service must run. And so the substantive CEO has started to step aside, but that leaves a vacuum. Work must go on. And that is why Dr. White has been brought in an interim or acting position.
Well, Prof, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
And viewers, this has been Hot Issues, and I do hope that all of us have managed to pick up a thing or two from this conversation with the Honorable Minister of Education. As I've always said, the best is on TV3. So keep your dial here until we meet again next week. It's bye-bye from all of us from TV3. See you again very soon.